24 points, 11 rebounds, 4 blocks, 1 steal, and a defensive rating of 110.2. Those are numbers that scream Defensive Player of the Year, but not in 2025. Since the 2023-2024 season, the NBA introduced a new rule. Players must appear in at least 65 games and play a minimum of 20 minutes in each, in order to qualify for the MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Most Improved Player, and both All-NBA and All-Defense teams. Meaning, Victor Wembanyama, the clear front-runner for Defensive Player of the Year, is out of the race. He played just 46 games before being shut down for the season due to deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder. This serious condition sidelines him for the remainder of the season. For San Antonio, this injury raises huge concerns, especially as they adjust to their new roster with De'Aaron Fox. Players like Brandon Ingram, Azar Thompson, and Anderson Varejao have successfully returned from blood clots. But history has also shown how career-threatening this condition can be. Just ask Chris Bosh, whose career was cut short in 2016 after clots travelled to his lungs. The Defensive Player of the Year race is wide open. In my opinion, 3 players stand out as top contenders, and no, none of them are Rudy Gobert. Before we get into the top 3, a huge shout out to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Led by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, and Lou Dort, OKC is second in the league in opponent points per game at 106.6, just behind the Orlando Magic. SGA is putting up MVP level numbers, 32 points, 5 rebounds, nearly 2 steals, and a block per game, with a defensive rating of 104.1 and a defensive win share of 0.177. J-Dub and Dort are right there with him, all posting elite defensive numbers. If SGA were to win both MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, he'd join an exclusive club that includes Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. However, OKC's defensive success almost works against them. The team is so good defensively that SGA's individual impact gets diluted. If Chet Holmgren hadn't gone down earlier this season, we could have been looking at 4 Thunder players contending for Defensive Player of the Year. So does the team's dominance actually hurt SGA's case here? Let me know what you think in the comments. At number 3, I've got Dyson Daniels, aka the Great Barrier Thief or the Bendigo Bandit. He's not only a legitimate Defensive Player of the Year contender, but also a front-runner for Most Improved Player. Since being traded to the Atlanta Hawks in the offseason, in a deal that sent DeJounte Murray to the Pelicans, Daniels has been stepping up in a big way. He's averaging 13.3 points, 5.6 rebounds, just under a block per game, and leads the league with 3 steals, while also dominating in deflections. That's nearly double his stats from the last season. Playing alongside Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Zach Ricochet, Dyson's defensive impact has been undeniable. He also gained valuable experience on the international stage as a key defensive piece of Australia's Olympic team. But here's the problem, the Hawks just aren't that good. With Jalen Johnson injured, Daniels has taken on the role of Atlanta's primary perimeter defender in a guard-heavy Eastern Conference. Teams constantly try to exploit switches onto Trae Young, but Daniels does an incredible job recovering. In fact, he single-handedly saved the Hawks from losses in multiple games this season. The first game here, we can see De'Aaron Fox driving to the basket and then getting switched on to Daniels, who then is able to get the block and the steal to save the game. In slow-mo, we can see the help defense come across from Daniels as he strips De'Aaron Fox of the ball before saving it before going out of bounds. In this play, we can see Daniels fight through the screen and get the strip on Desmond Bane before passing the ball up ahead to Caris LeVert to win the game on a layup. However, his individual brilliance is somewhat overshadowed by Atlanta's poor team defense. The Hawks rank 28th in opponents' point per game, 119.5, and Daniels' defensive rating of 114.8 reflects that. While I don't think he'll take home the Defensive Player of the Year this year, he's a name to watch in future seasons as Atlanta improves. At number 2, I have Jaren Jackson Jr. The 2022-2023 Defensive Player of the Year, this season he's putting up 23 points, 6 rebounds, 1.3 steals, and 1.7 blocks per game. Unlike traditional shot blockers, Jackson isn't just a paint defender. He can switch on perimeter players, contest jump shots, and still recover to protect the rim. His ability to guard multiple positions makes him one of the most valuable defensive players in the NBA. The Memphis Grizzlies are a legit team this year, and despite the Grizzlies having to deal with multiple injuries this season, including Ja Morant and other key players, Jackson has remained a defensive anchor, proving he can hold his own even when the team isn't at full strength. One of Jackson's long-standing weaknesses has been foul trouble. He still struggles with picking up quick fouls, which limits his playing time and effectiveness at defense. This has been a recurring issue throughout his career, and it could be a factor that voters consider when evaluating his overall defensive impact. While Jackson is still an elite-level shot blocker, his defensive stats have also taken a slight dip compared to his Defensive Player of the Year winning season in 2022-2023. His blocks per game are lower, and his defensive rating isn't as dominant as before. While Triple J is still one of the league's best defenders, strong competition could cost him the award this season. At the number 1 spot for this year's Defensive Player of the Year award, I have Evan Mobley. Whilst averaging 18 points, 9.4 rebounds, just under a steal, and 1.6 blocks per game, doesn't necessarily scream Defensive Player of the Year. A closer look at his defensive stats, where he leads the Cavs in defensive rating and defensive win share, truly shows his impact. The Cavs are currently on track to have their best season ever. That's including LeBron and Kyrie era. At the time of this video, they are currently on a 12-game win streak and have a 52-10 record. Earlier in the season, Jarrett Allen missed several games, putting even more defensive responsibility on Mobley's shoulders. Instead of struggling, he thrived, proving he can in an elite defensive anchor even without another rim protector next to him. This solidified his case as a true defensive leader rather than just a complementary piece. His length, timing, and instincts make him one of the most effective rim protectors, forcing opponents to think twice before attacking the paint. With Victor Wembanyama out of the race and the Cleveland Cavaliers excelling in defense, this could be Mobley's year to secure his first Defensive Player of the Year. If he continues to play at this level and Cleveland remains the defensive powerhouse, it will be hard for voters to overlook it. When we compare the stats of these three players, we can see, whilst Daniels doesn't necessarily excel overall, his steals are way above all other contenders. In Jaren Jackson Jr.'s line, we can see that, whilst he leads in points, his rebounds are significantly lower than Mobley's. However, his blocks are just edging higher than Mobley. And in my first place, I've got Evan Mobley, who's averaging a solid 18.6 points alongside his defensive stats of 9.4 rebounds, just under 1 steal, 1.6 blocks, and a defensive rating and a defensive win share, which tops those two other contenders. Do you think Mobley deserves Defensive Player of the Year, or should someone else take the award? Let me know down in the comments.